Hey everybody, welcome back to GR Research, where we are again having fun with speaker upgrades. And the last couple of weeks I've had a lot of stuff flying through here and new stuff that's come in even today. So I'm going to do a little recap. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that's come in and some of the stuff we're going to be featuring and some cool stuff, maybe some not so cool stuff, some problem childs, some little bit of a gem or two here and there. But let's see. Let's start with this little guy right here. This is the Klipsch R-41M. And this one's been in here for a little while. It's got some cute little drivers here. The little horn and the little metal cone woofer that misbehaves quite a bit. Inexpensive little box, the same parts quality that we typically see in the Klipsch models. The little iron core inductors, some electrolytic caps, the little sandcast resistors. I think there might have been a poly cap on the tweeter, but it's a cute little speaker. The grill's held on magnetically, and it is designed to wall mount. But how did this thing measure? Well, let's take a look at the on-axis frequency response and we'll see a little bit of lumpiness. And I don't mind seeing a little long curvy lumpiness, but these are some quick spikes. And the tweeter level is about 3 or 4 dB louder than the little woofer, which is typical of what we see with a lot of these Klipsch models. So what's that going to sound like? Well, there's some ringing going on in this thing and some breakup, and that's going to be hard to listen to. The tweeter is, like I said, quite a bit louder than the woofer, so it's eventually going to probably get on your nerves. And the parts quality that's in there is going to smear most of what's there. Let's look at the individual driver response, and we'll see the tweeter's got a rising response as it goes lower in frequency, so you'll see a little bit of a hump there at the bottom of the tweeter's curve. And then the woofer's curve, man, that's choppy. Big peak right there at about 1,000 hertz. Another pretty good size one out there. It looks like about 4,000 hertz. That's a mess. That's one of those deals where the engineers need to say, well, that didn't measure very well. Let's go back to the drawing board and see if we can fix this thing, because the only way to fix it when it reaches this point is to pack a lot of parts on it and start trying to compensate for the things that are wrong with it. If we look at the spectral decay, we'll see a lot of it's pretty clean. It drops off pretty evenly, but right there in that woofer's range at around 1100 hertz, there's a peak there that turns into a lot of stored energy. So that one's going to be a problem. The customer, though, said he did want me to see what I could do with it. So I went to work on this thing, and here's the new crossover response. As you can see, each of the drivers fall pretty neatly into the next. I put a pretty aggressive notch filter on the woofer's curve and knocked down that peak that was there. So I took a little bit of that in-your-face sound out of it. In fact, let's flash back to the individual driver responses and look at individual driver responses and then what I was able to do with it with a filter. Now keep in mind, the more jacked up the driver's response looks, which in fact these are really jacked up, the more parts you have to put on it to correct it. Now I did correct it and it looks okay. And if you look at the overall frequency response now by itself, you'll see it's well within a nice plus or minus less than 2 dB, like plus or minus a dB and a half. So pretty smooth. But the parts total, well, it wasn't too bad, but it's up there. And because the box is so small, these parts aren't going to fit in the box very well. And that's what I originally told the customer. I said, I don't think you'll be able to put real parts in the bottom of this box because it's pretty small and have room for it all. You have to get real creative on getting it all in there. Maybe a multi-layer board, or it's going to have to be mounted externally. Well, he said he didn't care, he may mount it externally. So I did configure a crossover for it. I didn't total up the prices on all this stuff yet, because I really don't see this as being a really viable kit to throw out there. But if you guys are interested in it, I'll throw something together and get some prices for you on that one. That's the little Klipsch one there. This little Klipsch model just walked in the door. It is it's the RP-500M. So it's the model down from the RP-600 that we've sold hundreds of upgrade kits for. So we're going to see what we can do with this little model, and maybe we can help it as much as we did the RP-600. So that's coming. And we got this little Paradigm center channel that's sitting here. Oh, man. All right, let's look at the frequency response of this little Paradigm center channel. Pretty choppy. I mean, this thing's rough. We got response issues where there's just little chops and peaks, and the top end is elevated a little over the woofer end. And I've looked at the effect of the grill, and it had a little bit of an effect, but it's a nice grill. I like the way it's held on. Nice magnetic grill, pretty much like the Klipsch. It's becoming a little bit standard now. That's a good thing. The horizontal off-axis and vertical off-axis look pretty good as far as the phase relationship of the drivers is concerned, but pretty choppy. If we look at the spectral decay, we'll see it's not bad considering how peakish it is. There's a little stored energy down at the bottom, but the real kicker, the impedance curve shows that it drops to 2.9 ohms. Come on, Paradigm. I mean, people are going to be hooking this up to their home theater receivers. They need a reasonable impedance load. They don't need it to be a dead short. Come on. Get these guys something decent. So, because the choppiness was so bad on these drivers and these metal cone drivers, they're going to ring. I'm just sending this one back to the guy. I don't see any point in trying to spend a lot of money trying to fix something that is just not worth it. It's not going to sound great. Even if I start putting good parts on it, the quality of the drivers are just not there. So sometimes it's better to start over. Now, let's touch base on two that you don't see in the picture here. The SVS that we had in here, the tower, and I have quite a few of you guys asking about the SVS tower upgrade. Their tower measured okay. It just had really cheesy parts in it. I mean, those part quality, oh man, it was bad. So, out with that, I replicated the crossover, hooked it all up externally, exactly like what they had on it, and couldn't help myself. I had to go in and tweak a few parts and smooth it out a little bit more. Here's the frequency response of the measured pair once they were done and were on their way out the door. The upgrade for that one came to $679. Now that's all new parts, all new wiring, a set of tube connectors, and some of the solder and your heat shrink that you'll need for assembly. There's a lot of parts involved in that thing. It was basically a 3.5 way, or yeah, I'd call it a 3.5 way speaker. It's already on the website, so if you guys want to check that out, go have a look, and that's there for you to click on and order for all you SVS guys. And if you guys need me to take a look at some of the other SVS models, send them on in and I'll take a look. The other one I want to talk to you about, it's already boxed back up, it's in the other room, it's ready for pickup. The Magnepan LRS. Now the Magnepan LRS is a nice little model that is their new darling, small, inexpensive model. I mean, it's a great value. So, how did that thing measure? Let's take a look. If you just look at the frequency response by itself, it looks a little jacked up in the bottom end. Yeah, the lower end is well above the tweeter's response. So, the trick on this thing is, if you've got LMRs or any Magnepans, they're not hard to work on, but you have to know how to disassemble the whole thing. You have to flip it over upside down. You have to take all of the staples out. then you'll get a flap that'll kind of come over, and then you can pull all the staples out on the other side. That's to get the sock off. And then there's a couple of little wood inserts on the ends, and you have to gently go in and pry those out without breaking them. It's easy to break them. Pry them out a little bit, and then you can slide the sock down and you can get to everything. You want to go in and just chunk the old crossover, pull the pins, the little push-on connectors off the drivers. The tough part is figuring out the positives and negatives on the drivers. You're going to have to look at what's what and figure out which one's positive and which one's negative. For me, it was pretty easy because I could run a impulse response and I could see which direction the pulse went, whether it went up or down, and I could mark them. But then you go to the next speaker and it's mirror image, so it's going to be the opposite. So you're going to have to go in and figure out what your pluses and minuses are on the panels. That's the trickiest part. And if you get it wrong, what's going to happen is you're just going to have a real big hole in the response, and you'll realize tweeter and mid or the tweeter mid-bass panel are out of phase, and you're going to have to go in and flip it and get it corrected. So anyway, here is the frequency response of just the tweeter and just the mid-bass panel and how they sung. And if we look at that, we realize the tweeter's playing down really low. I mean, they were pretty much just letting it play full range. They had a first order series network on these things. The cap value was huge, and the little iron core inductor on there was pretty good size as well, so it wasn't really effective in controlling the tweeter at all. It's just, like I said, it's just letting it play down as low as it could, and there was a big hump there in the lower range, and hump for you guys this way is a hump in the lower range, and it overlapped on top of the mid panel, and if you look, you'll see that where they cross over each other as they go higher in frequency, they're in phase. They're adding a little bit of gain. But as you go lower, right there at the right below the crossover point, they're actually out of phase. They're actually it's actually knocking some output out of it. Otherwise, it would be even a little more humped up. So we got a phase relationship situation going on there. And you also have to remember, I have to remember, when measuring a series network, I have to replace replace each panel. If I'm measuring the mid-bass panel, I have to replace the tweeter in the circuit with a resistor of the same value to take the place in order to complete the series filter. I'll have to do the same thing with the mid-bass panel, is replace that panel with a resistor and then look at the tweeter's response, because it's all part of the same circuit when you use a series network. So that was a mess. The tweeter, when you play it hard, would probably get pretty stressed. If we look at the spectral decay, you'll see there's a little bit of stored energy down there at the crossover point too. So there's some ringing going on there. So a bit of a mess. Now, what did I do with it? Let's look at the frequency response of what I did with it. And I put a second order on the tweeter and a first order on the mid panel. They fall right into each other real evenly. They're in phase the whole range. They're crossing about 1200 hertz. Tweeter is well out of its range of being stressed. It should sound lots cleaner. It's a lot more balanced. And the parts quality just shot up by a lot. We're using some big air core inductors and one sonic cap. And so big time jump in the parts quality. I'm going to throw in some tube connectors and some new wiring. The trick is going to be figuring out how to get that to mount in the old space. You're going to have to do a little finagling. You may have to cut a new wood panel to go on the back, and you're going to need to, because the old little metal panel with the fuse and the ferromagnetic parts in it and the cheap bonding put, all that needs to be thrown away. Just take that off, throw it away, cut a new wood piece that will fit there, and mount everything in that space if you can. If not, you may have to go into the wood panel area that you're putting on. You can do one the same size, you can do one that's a little bigger, whatever you want, and mount the tube connectors in it. You're going to have to get a little creative, and you're going to have to be a little more than a beginner to do the upgrades on these Magnepans. Let's look to the spectral decay now is much cleaner, and let's look at the before and after impedance plots. If you look at the before, you'll see it's almost a flat line, but at the crossover point, it actually dipped quite a bit. it dropped to 3.1 ohms because the cap values were so big in the series network that it was just basically starting to make it into a short right there. So that was a bit of a mess. The new impedance plot, you can see a rise at the crossover point where it's creating resistance between the two instead of just letting them play on top of each other. And now it only drops to 3.6 ohms at the tweeter end. So that one is going to be a significant upgrade for you Magnepan lovers out there that want to get after it. It's there. That upgrade is going to be $229, and that'll include everything you need to upgrade that pair of those LRSs. LRSs, that's correct. That's it for the new stuff I've got coming out that I've done. I'm going to do new videos on this stuff. We're going to look at the Revel speaker that just came in. This is a little $4,000 mini monitor. We're going to see, is this thing really worth it or not? We're going to do an entire video segment on it and on the little Wharfedale over here, which actually is quite a little speaker. And we've got the Sony. I think this is a CS3. I think this is the floor standing version of the little mini monitor, the CS5 that was in here, that measured pretty well. Spoiler alert, the floor standing model doesn't measure that well. I don't know what they were thinking when they went to this model, but we're going to tear into it and look into the guts on this thing and see if we can figure out how to turn this into a little gem as well. So all that's coming up, so hang on, more new videos are headed your way. Be sure and hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and thanks for watching. See you guys on the next video.